21-year-old Kim Sue Leggett was last seen on October 9, 1984, standing outside the Ross Cotton Gin where she worked in Mercedes, Texas as a secretary. The Ross Cotton Gin was a family business owned by her father-in-law. At 4:30 p.m., a customer came to the gin with a load of produce and Kim helped him weigh it. Shortly afterwards, she was seen talking to two men in the parking lot next to Kim's car in a white sports car. When the customer came back with another load at 5 p.m., Kim was no longer there. At 4:45 p.m. that same day, Kim's parents received two phone calls saying she had been kidnapped and the abductor wanted a ransom. They originally didn't take the call seriously and assumed it was a joke. Still, they attempted to call Kim at her work but received no answer. Her father then drove to the gin and found her car still parked in the parking lot with her purse and keys inside. Kim was a college student studying to be an X-ray technician, and her books were found open on the desk in the office with a pencil to mark her place and a calculator left on. However, Kim was nowhere to be found. A ransom note was mailed to her family after her disappearance, demanding $250,000 in cash. The letter appeared to be in Kim's handwriting, but the writing on the envelope was in another person's handwriting. The witness was able to provide enough details to a sketch artist to get sketches created of both men that she was last seen talking to. One theory is that Kim's stepfather, Lefty Gardner, at the time of her abduction, was a pilot and a member of the Confederate Air Force, now called the Commemorative Air Force, and maybe he refused to smuggle contraband into Mexico. Some think Kim's abduction was retaliation for his refusal, but little evidence was found to support this theory. There were some flaws in the investigation of Kim's disappearance. Two of the biggest mistakes were the Mercedes Police Department waited 20 days to call in federal investigators, and the area where Kim went missing was never treated as a crime scene. In 2012, the FBI released aerial photos of the area around the cotton gin in hopes of sparking new leads and interest in the case. However, despite those efforts and a $100,000 reward, no one has come forward with information. DNA testing was also done on the envelopes but led nowhere. Kim's husband was also looked at as a possible suspect. However, he cooperated fully with the investigation and maintains his innocence in her disappearance. She left behind her 1-year-old son and her husband who filed for divorce after Kim went missing. No suspects have ever been named in her disappearance, and the case remains unsolved. Nine-year-old Dorien Thomas lived in an apartment complex in the 1300 block of Northwest 9th Avenue in Amarillo, Texas, where he lived with his mother. Dorien was last seen on October 26, 1998, several blocks from his mother's apartment near his grandmother's house, riding his bicycle. The day he disappeared, a witness claims to have seen him filling up his bicycle tire with air. The bicycle he was riding was made by the company Huffy, and it had a girl's frame colored aqua green and had very small white rubber tires and rims, along with the words "freestyle" imprinted on one side. It disappeared with him and has never been recovered. There was a bicycle similar to Dorien's found at a nearby lake, but it was later determined not to be his. He was reported as a missing child after more than 24 hours after his disappearance, and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance remains unclear. Authorities have been unable to determine if he was abducted or if other factors were involved in the case. A possible clue is that Dorien was one of the children who discovered the body of Gloria Ann Covington, who had been stabbed to death in August of 1997, more than 1 year prior to his disappearance. Dorien was playing in Hilltop Park in Amarillo with friends when they came across Covington's remains behind the YMCA building. Linda Gale Jackson was also killed 1 month after Covington's death, and the cases may be related. Witnesses reported that she entered a vehicle similar to the truck involved in Covington's case. Both women's homicides remain unsolved. Another incident involving Dorien was a woman was beaten by an unidentified white man in September 1998 and stopped at Dorien's mother's home for help. She said her attacker had red hair pulled in a ponytail, blue eyes, and a mustache. The woman said that Dorien was home at the time and was seen by the attacker. The woman claimed that the assailant threatened to harm her again in the future. She personally believes the individual may be involved in Dorien's disappearance, but there is no proof of this. Authorities also have been unable to determine if Dorien's disappearance is actually related to the unsolved murders. Several of Dorien's relatives initially believed a family friend took him to Dallas, Texas. However, the individual called authorities shortly thereafter, and it was determined he was not involved in Dorien's disappearance. Extensive searches of the Amarillo area have produced no clues as to his whereabouts. As of today, Dorien remains missing and the case remains unsolved. Danielle Marie Sleeper was last seen at her home in Magnolia, Texas on March 22, 2015. She and her husband of 5 years, Austin, had attended a cookout at a friend's home in Field Store, Texas. They arrived there in 2 separate vehicles, but left together in a white 1996 Ford F-350 pickup truck at 1 a.m. They were arguing, and Austin was insisting she come home, but Danielle wanted to spend the night at a friend's house. Danielle had made plans to meet her friends later in the day, but she never showed up and didn't respond to any text messages, and calls to her cell phone went directly to voicemail. On the night she disappeared, there were numerous text messages and other activity on the phone until 3:12 a.m. The last time the phone was turned on was 2 days after she was last seen, when it pinged off a tower 2.5 miles from her home. Danielle's email account had not been accessed since 5 days before she went missing, and her bank account and credit cards hadn't been used since 2 days before she went missing. The day after Danielle's disappearance, Austin would show up at Danielle's friend's house alone to retrieve her car. He would tell the friend that he hadn't seen Danielle since the morning after the cookout. He said when he left the house to go pick up her car, Danielle was asleep on the couch, but when he returned, he claimed she was no longer there. Her purse and cell phone were missing, and to this day have never been found. When Danielle's sister went to her home, she discovered the house was in disarray with items scattered all over the place. This was very unlike Danielle, who always kept her house very clean. She would also find Austin acting very strange and suspiciously had failed to report his wife missing. Immediately after Danielle's disappearance, Austin had his mother, who lived 7 hours away in Louisiana, come pick up their 3-year-old son and take him back to Louisiana with her. Danielle and Austin were going through a legal battle with Child Protective Services due to Austin's abuse of their 3 children, and he was facing felony injury charges. CPS would remove the 2 oldest boys that Danielle had from a previous marriage, and Austin was facing up to 2 years in prison for the charge. The children would also state that Austin always mistreated them when Danielle wasn't home. Austin's court date was set 1 week after Danielle's disappearance. It seems Austin and Danielle didn't have the best relationship, with him cloning her phone in order to monitor her calls and messages, and he also had stated that he didn't like Danielle's boys and hated spending money on children that weren't his. Austin had a previous arrest record and had threatened Danielle by saying if she ever left him, she would never take their son with her. Something really strange in the case was Austin and his friends would play a game where they would try and describe the best way to hide a body, and mutual friends heard the same kind of talk weeks before her disappearance. He even went as far as to say he scouted out 2 locations in Waller County to use if he ever needed to do such a thing. Strangely enough, the couple who hosted the party that Danielle and Austin were at the night before her disappearance moved out of state suddenly after only living in the house for 3 months. Danielle and Austin's son together was Hagen, and he could be a key witness in the case, but Austin had his mother take him across the state line into Louisiana the morning before he reported Danielle missing. He also gave away Danielle's car 2 days before her disappearance. At this point, Austin and his mother retained a lawyer and have refused to speak to police about the case. He also lost touch with Danielle's family and has never participated in any of the ground searches or helped hand out missing person flyers because he stated that his attorney advised him not to. Austin has never been charged in her disappearance, but he remains a suspect in the case. As of today, Danielle has never been found, and this case still remains a mystery. Michael Adams was last seen by his stepsister as she looked out her bedroom window at around 11:30 p.m. on June 8, 1987. Mike was 18 years old and lived in Abilene, Texas, and worked at M Systems grocery store. On the night he disappeared, he had closed down the grocery store and then drove to his home on Peach Street. When he pulled into his driveway, he woke up his sister Beverly, who was asleep upstairs. She got up and looked out the window and saw Mike talking to someone in an older model brown or gray GM with opera-style windows and possible malfunctioning headlights that were flickering. Police believe there was only one person in the car, although they received some tips that indicated there were 2 people. When Beverly saw this, she didn't think anything suspicious and assumed Mike was talking to a friend, and so she went back to sleep. The next morning, Mike's stepmother woke up to leave for work and noticed that his car was behind hers, blocking her path out of the driveway. This was strange because Mike always arranged the cars ahead of time to prevent this from happening. When she went back inside to get Mike, he was nowhere to be found. Mike had some issues with some coworkers who got upset because Mike received a promotion over them, and they believed it was because of his age. He also had a run-in with his manager, Steve Turner, because Mike had caught someone stealing from the back room, and instead of thanking him for catching the person, Steve reprimanded him for not being at the front of the store. This was very suspicious because in order to access the back room, an employee would have had to let the person in, or maybe an employee gave them a key. Mike was very upset about Steve's reaction and had planned to send a letter to corporate to complain about it, but ultimately decided against it. All employees were given polygraph tests, and one employee would come out with inconclusive results. That person was a coworker of Mike's that had once said if he ever needed someone to disappear, all he would have to do is make a phone call. None of Mike's family has seen him since Beverly saw him through her bedroom window on the night he disappeared. Some tips came in later suggesting that Michael was assaulted and killed at the Lake Fort Phantom area. However, law enforcement investigated this claim, but nothing ever came of it. Other tips suggested that on the night he disappeared, he was visiting a house nearby for a short period of time around the 16th Street vicinity, or he was going for a short drive in a car with multiple occupants. Mike's store keys have never been recovered, and in 1994, he was declared legally dead. No one has ever been arrested in his disappearance, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Marla Mullins was 24 years old when she was last seen in Mineola, Texas on December 12, 1981. She went to a Christmas party at a restaurant across the street from the garage apartment where she lived. A female friend stated Marla left the restaurant at 8 p.m. with a man they both knew. The man stated he later took her back to the restaurant and claimed he saw her get into a vehicle with 3 people he didn't recognize. She has never been heard from again. After she went missing, there were rumors that she was working at a Houston, Texas nightclub, but police were never able to verify that. Also, her family didn't think she would have left without telling them. As of today, her only surviving relative is her sister, and she stated Marla had gotten involved with a rough crowd prior to her disappearance. Kevin Leon Curbo is the prime suspect in Marla's case. He is currently serving a life sentence for the 1995 murder of a Rains County, Texas woman. Authorities began searching a site along the Sabine River near Mineola, Texas for Marla's remains in May 2010. They stated information provided by Kerbo led them to that location. However, nothing was found during the search. As of today, Marla remains missing and the case unsolved.